John Chrysostom, 349–407, Archbishop of Constantinople, was an important early church father. He is known for his preaching and public speaking, his denunciation of abusive authority by both ecclesiastical and political leaders, the divine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and his ascetic sensibilities. The epithet Chi-Rho Upsilon Sigma Omicron Sigma Tau Omicron Mu Omicron Sigma means golden-mouthed in Greek and denotes his celebrated eloquence. The Eastern Orthodox and Byzantine Catholic churches honor him as a saint and count him among the three holy hierarchs, together with Basil the Great and Gregory of Nazianzus. He is recognized by the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church as a saint and as a doctor of the Church. Churches of the Western tradition, including the Roman Catholic Church, some Anglican provinces, and some Lutheran churches, commemorate him on the 13th of September. Some other Lutheran churches and Anglican provinces commemorate him on the traditional Eastern feast day of the 27th of January. The Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria also recognize him as a saint. Biography. Early life and education. John was born in Antioch in 349 to Greco-Syrian parents. Different scholars describe his mother Anthiso as a pagan or as a Christian, and his father was a high-ranking military officer. John's father died soon after his birth and he was raised by his mother. He was baptized in 368 or 373 and tonsured as a reader. As a result of his mother's influential connections in the city, John began his education under the pagan teacher Libanius. From Libanius, John acquired the skills for a career in rhetoric, as well as a love of the Greek language and literature. As he grew older, however, John became more deeply committed to Christianity and went on to study theology under Diodor of Tarsus, founder of the reconstituted School of Antioch. According to the Christian historian Chrysostom, Libanius was supposed to have said on his deathbed that John would have been his successor, if the Christians had not taken him from us. John lived in extreme asceticism and became a hermit in about 375. He spent the next 2 years continually standing, scarcely sleeping, and committing the Bible to memory. As a consequence of these practices, his stomach and kidneys were permanently damaged, and poor health forced him to return to Antioch. Diaconate and service. In Antioch, John was ordained as a deacon in 381 by St. Meletius of Antioch, who was not then in communion with Alexandria and Rome. After the death of Meletius, John separated himself from the followers of Meletius, without joining Paulinus, the rival of Meletius, for the bishopric of Antioch. But after the death of Paulinus he was ordained a presbyter in 386 by Evagrius, the successor of Paulinus. He was destined later to bring about reconciliation between Flavian I of Antioch, Alexandria, and Rome, thus bringing those three sees into communion for the first time in nearly 70 years. In Antioch, over the course of 12 years, John gained popularity because of the eloquence of his public speaking at the Golden Church, Antioch's cathedral, especially his insightful expositions of Bible passages and moral teaching. The most valuable of his works from this period are his homilies on various books of the Bible. He emphasized charitable giving and was concerned with the spiritual and temporal needs of the poor. He spoke against abuse of wealth and personal property. Do you wish to honor the body of Christ? Do not ignore him when he is naked. Do not pay him homage in the temple clad in silk, only then to neglect him outside where he is cold and ill-clad. He who said, "This is my body," is the same who said, "You saw me hungry and you gave me no food," and, "Whatever you did to the least of my brothers you did also to me." What good is it if the Eucharistic table is overloaded with golden chalices when your brother is dying of hunger? Start by satisfying his hunger, and then with what is left you may adorn the altar as well. His straightforward understanding of the Scriptures, in contrast to the Alexandrian tendency towards allegorical interpretation, meant that the Themes of his talks were practical, explaining the Bible's application to everyday life. Such straightforward preaching helped Chrysostom to garner popular support. He founded a series of hospitals in Constantinople to care for the poor. One incident that happened during his service in Antioch illustrates the influence of his homilies. When Chrysostom arrived in Antioch, Flavian, the bishop of the city, had to intervene with Emperor Theodosius I on behalf of citizens who had gone on a rampage mutilating statues of the emperor and his family. During the weeks of Lent in 387, John preached more than 20 homilies in which he entreated the people to see the error of their ways. These made a lasting impression on the general population of the city. Many pagans converted to Christianity as a result of the homilies. As a result, Theodosius' vengeance was not as severe as it might have been. Archbishop of Constantinople in the autumn of 397, John was appointed Archbishop of Constantinople, after having been nominated without his knowledge by the eunuch Eutropius. He had to leave Antioch in secret due to fears that the departure of such a popular figure would cause civil unrest. During his time as archbishop, he adamantly refused to host lavish social gatherings, which made him popular with the common people, but unpopular with wealthy citizens and the clergy. His reforms of the clergy were also unpopular. He told visiting regional preachers to return to the churches they were meant to be serving, without any payout. His time in Constantinople was more tumultuous than his time in Antioch. Theophilus, the Patriarch of Alexandria, wanted to bring Constantinople under his sway and opposed John's appointment to Constantinople. Theophilus had disciplined 4 Egyptian monks over their support of Origen's teachings. They fled to John and were welcomed by him. Theophilus therefore accused John of being too partial to the teaching of Origen. He made another enemy in Aelia Eudoxia, wife of Emperor Arcadius, who assumed that John's denunciations of extravagance in feminine dress were aimed at herself. Eudoxia, Theophilus and other of his enemies held a synod in 403 to charge John, in which his connection to Origen was used against him. It resulted in his deposition and banishment. He was called back by Arcadius almost immediately, as the people became tumultuous over his departure, even threatening to burn the royal palace. There was an earthquake the night of his arrest, which Eudoxia took for a sign of God's anger, prompting her to ask Arcadius for John's reinstatement. Peace was short-lived. A silver statue of Eudoxia was erected in the Augustan, near his cathedral. John denounced the pagan dedication ceremonies. He spoke against her in harsh terms. Again Herodias raves, again she is troubled, she dances again, and again desires to receive John's head in a charger, an allusion to the events surrounding the death of John the Baptist. Once again he was banished, this time to the Caucasus in Abkhazia. Around 405, Chrysostom began to lend moral and financial support to Christian monks who were enforcing the emperor's anti-pagan laws, by destroying temples and shrines in Phoenicia and nearby regions. Death and canonization. Faced with exile, John Chrysostom wrote an appeal for help to 3 churchmen: Pope Innocent I, the Bishop of Milan, Venerius, and the third to the Bishop of Aquileia, Chromatius. In 1872, church historian William Stephens wrote, "The Patriarch of the Eastern Rome appeals to the great bishops of the West, as the champions of an ecclesiastical discipline which he confesses himself unable to enforce, or to see any prospect of establishing. No jealousy is entertained of the Patriarch of the Old Rome by the Patriarch of the New Rome. The interference of Innocent is courted, a certain primacy is accorded him, but at the same time he is not addressed as a supreme arbitrator. Assistance and sympathy are solicited from him as from an elder brother, and 2 other prelates of Italy are joint recipients with him of the appeal." Pope Innocent I protested John's banishment from Constantinople to the town of Caucasus in Cappadocia. but to no avail. Innocent sent a delegation to intercede on behalf of John in 405. It was led by Gaudentius of Brescia. Gaudentius and his companions, 2 bishops, encountered many difficulties and never reached their goal of entering Constantinople. John wrote letters which still held great influence in Constantinople. As a result of this, he was further exiled from the Caucasus to Pishent, where his tomb is a shrine for pilgrims. He never reached this destination, though, as he died at Comana Pontica on 14 September 407 during the journey. His last words are said to have been, Delta Omicron Chi Alpha Tau Theta Epsilon Pi Alpha Nu Tau Omega Nu Nu Epsilon Kappa Epsilon Nu. John came to be venerated as a saint soon after his death. 3 decades later, some of his adherents in Constantinople remained in schism. Saint Proclus, Patriarch of Constantinople, hoping to bring about the reconciliation of these Johannites, preached a homily praising his predecessor in the Church of Hagia Sophia. He said, "O John, your life was filled with sorrow, but your death was glorious. Your grave is blessed and reward is great, by the grace and mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ, O graced one. Having conquered the bounds of time and place, love has conquered space, unforgetting memory has annihilated the limits, and place does not hinder the miracles of the saint." These homilies helped to mobilize public opinion, and the Patriarch received permission from the Emperor to return Chrysostom's relics to Constantinople, where they were enshrined in the Church of the Holy Apostles on 28 January 438. The Eastern Orthodox Church commemorates him as a great ecumenical teacher, together with Basil the Great and Gregory the Theologian. These 3 saints, in addition to having their own individual commemorations throughout the year, are commemorated together on 30 January, a feast known as the Synaxis of the 3 Hierarchs. There are several feast days dedicated to him. The 27th of January, translation of the relics of St. John Chrysostom from Comana to Constantinople. The 30th of January, Synaxis of the 3 great hierarchs. The 14th of September, repose of St. John Chrysostom. The 13th of November, St. John Chrysostom the Archbishop of Constantinople. Writings. Homilies. Paschal homily. The best known of his many homilies, the Paschal homily, is rather brief. In the Eastern Orthodox Church it is traditionally read in full each year at the Paschal Divine Liturgy service following the Midnight Orthros. General Chrysostom's extant homiletical works are vast, including many hundreds of exegetical homilies on both the New Testament and the Old Testament. Among his extant exegetical works are 67 homilies on Genesis, 59 on the Psalms, 90 on the Gospel of Matthew, 88 on the Gospel of John, and 55 on the Acts of the Apostles. The homilies were written down by stenographers and subsequently circulated, revealing a style that tended to be direct and greatly personal, but formed by the rhetorical conventions of his time and place. In general, his homiletical theology displays much characteristic of the Antiochian school, but he also uses a good deal of the allegorical interpretation more associated with the Alexandrian school. John's social and religious world was formed by the continuing and pervasive presence of paganism in the life of the city. One of his regular topics was the paganism in the culture of Constantinople, and in his homilies he thunders against popular pagan amusements, the theatre, horse races, and the revelry surrounding holidays. In particular, he criticized Christians for taking part in such activities. If you ask Christians, who is Amos or Obadiah, how many apostles there were or prophets, they stand mute, but if you ask them about their horses or drivers, they answer with more solemnity than sophists or rhetors. One of the recurring features of John's homilies is his emphasis on care for the needy. Echoing themes found in the Gospel of Matthew, he calls upon the rich to lay aside materialism in favor of helping the poor, often employing all of his rhetorical skills to shame wealthy people to abandon conspicuous consumption. Do you pay such honor to your excrements as to receive them into a silver chamber pot when another man made in the image of God is perishing in the cold? Homilies on Jews and Judaizing Christians. During his first 2 years as a presbyter in Antioch, John denounced Jews and Judaizing Christians in a series of 8 homilies delivered to Christians in his congregation who were taking part in Jewish festivals and other Jewish observances. It is disputed whether the main target were specifically Judaizers or Jews in general. His homilies were expressed in the conventional manner, utilizing the uncompromising rhetorical form known as the Sagos. One of the purposes of these homilies was to prevent Christians from participating in Jewish customs, and thus prevent the perceived erosion of Chrysostom's flock. In his homilies, John criticized those Judaizing Christians who were participating in Jewish festivals and taking part in other Jewish observances, such as the Shabbat, submitted to circumcision and made pilgrimage to Jewish holy places. John claimed that on the Shabbats and Jewish festivals, synagogues were full of Christians, especially women, who loved the solemnity of the Jewish liturgy, enjoyed listening to the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and applauded famous preachers in accordance with the contemporary custom. A more recent theory is that he instead tried to persuade Jewish Christians, who for centuries had kept connections with Jews and Judaism, to choose between Judaism and Christianity. In Greek the homilies are called kateriodion, which is translated as Adversus Judaeos in Latin and Against the Jews in English. The original Benedictine editor of the homilies, Bernard de Montfaucon, gives the following footnote to the title: "Our discourse against the Jews, but it was delivered against those who were Judaizing and keeping the fasts with them, the Jews, according to patristics scholars." Opposition to any particular view during the late 4th century was conventionally expressed in a manner, utilizing the rhetorical form known as the Sagos, whose literary conventions were to vilify opponents in an uncompromising manner. Thus, it has been argued that to call Chrysostom an anti-Semite is to employ anachronistic terminology in a way incongruous with historical context in record. This does not preclude assertions that Chrysostom's theology was a form of anti-Jewish supersessionism. Treatises apart from his homilies, a number of John's other treatises have had a lasting influence. One such work is John's early treatise against those who opposed the monastic life, written while he was a deacon, which was directed to parents, pagan as well as Christian, whose sons were contemplating a monastic vocation. Chrysostom wrote that, already in his day, it was customary for Antiochians to send their sons to be educated by monks. Other important treatises written by John include On the Priesthood, Instructions to Catechumens, and On the Incomprehensibility of the Divine Nature. In addition, he wrote a series of letters to the Deaconess Olympias, of which 17 are extant. Liturgy beyond his preaching. The other lasting legacy of John is his influence on Christian liturgy. 2 of his writings are particularly notable. He harmonized the liturgical life of the Church by revising the prayers and rubrics of the Divine Liturgy, or celebration of the Holy Eucharist. To this day, Eastern Orthodox and Eastern Catholic churches of the Byzantine Rite typically celebrate the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom as the normal Eucharistic liturgy, although his exact connection with it remains a matter of debate among experts.